Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings FanDuel MLB video, Benny's Bats for, we got June 20, Tuesday, June 28th today. We have a big 15-game slate. Everybody's in action tonight. A lot of games, a couple aces on the mound, a couple gas cans to go after, a lot of stuff to talk about. So let's get right into it. The first game that we're going to talk about, we got the New York Mets going up against the Washington Nationals. Matt Harvey on the mound for the Mets. Washington lit them up the last two times that they faced them about a month ago. 14 runs allowed, only went 7.2 innings, 5 innings in one start, 2.2 innings in the other start, gave up 16 hits. He is pitching a little bit better now than he did back then, but I really don't think this is a great matchup for him. You know, Harvey is not the guy that we remember him being from last year. Now, normally you want to go left-handed bats against him. Bryce Harper is 1 for 24 lifetime. Now, I would think that Harper's actually in a pretty good spot here, but I mean, 1 for 24 lifetime is 1 for 24 lifetime. It's not a very good, matchup. It hasn't been for him. Even with Harvey struggling this year, Harper really hasn't hit him. So as much as I would like to say Harper's the guy that stands out on paper, 1 of 24 is something that's a pretty significant number. So we do have to keep an eye on that and be a little bit afraid. On the other side, I mean, Daniel Murphy, this is the first time Murphy's ever had a chance to bat up against Harvey. 2 for 4 with 2 home runs this year already against them. So 372 WOBA, 217 ISO against right-handed pitching for Murphy. So he's definitely somebody that's in play. You also might get Ben Revere leading off again. He had a big game yesterday, another left-handed bat that they throw in there. Should be able to do some damage against Harvey. And like I said, I mean, they lit Harvey up for 14 runs and 16 hits and only 7 innings so far this year. So this isn't really a good matchup that I want to target him in. On the other side of this game, we get a chance to see Lucas Giolito for the first time. It's his first start. He's a former top pick. He was drafted 16th overall as a 17-year-old in 2012. He's 21 years old right now. Been pitching in the minors, doing pretty well in Double-A. They called him up. He's probably only going to go like 5 or 6 innings in this game, so you're also going to get a lot of the bullpen. I think the left-handed bats are the way I want to go. Remember, this Mets lineup is a little bit weaker right now. They sent Conforto down to the minor leagues. They got like Neil Walker hitting cleanup. You got Granderson leading off. Those 2 left-handed bats are probably 2 of my favorite here. I also think Cespedes will be in a pretty good spot. He does well in righty-on-righty matchups, so I wouldn't mind throwing him in there as well. But honestly, I don't see a lot of upside with this Mets offense. Washington's not a good hitter's park. I can't see that the Mets are going to put up a lot of runs here. Next game we can talk about, we got Texas against the Yankees. Cole Hamels on the mound for Texas, left-hander. Been pretty good in his last couple starts. Right-handed bats do have a higher average and basically all the power. Left-handed bats do not hit home runs against them, so it's basically right-handed bats that tag them if you're going to get anybody. I mean, I guess A-Rod probably stands out if you want. He's still good against left-handed pitching, probably the most power that they have from the right side on the Yankees there. You can look at a guy like Starlin Castro. Castro's been very solid against left-handed pitching throughout his entire career, so he's another bat that I think is in play. My favorite bat is probably Carlos Beltran. I think he's the best hitter the Yankees have from either side of the plate this year. 358 WOBA for him, 216 ISO against left-handed pitching. So Beltran probably my favorite play. A-Rod and Castro are other guys I think you can look at. A-Rod is actually really cheap on DraftKings. He's like $3,200. I think this is about as good a spot for him as you can get. On the other side of the game, we got CC Sabathia, who's been really good this year. Very tough on left-handed bats. Right-handed bats really the way you want to go after him. Ian Desmond's bat has been on fire. 366 WOBA for him, 189 ISO score. Probably the biggest bat they have on that Texas Rangers team. I also think Adrian Beltre is somebody else that I think we can look at in this game. 387 WOBA, 221 ISO, hits left-handed pitching very, very well. Another guy that I think is in play here. Also, you're probably going to see a guy like Ryan Rua get in there with Prince Fielder probably taking a seat in this game. Rua's got a 379 WOBA, 238 ISO against left-handed pitching, so I think he makes a little bit of sense. And then Jurickson Profar is another guy, another right-handed bat, hits left-handed pitching pretty well. So I do think that, some of these Rangers could give CC a tough time, but CC's been pretty good this year. So I think if I did anything, I'd take some of the right-handed bats, but honestly, I don't think it's the softest spot we have on the day. Next game we can talk about, we got Boston against Tampa Bay. Chris Archer's on the mound. He's much better at home, which is where he is here today. His batting average is 100 points lower. His batting average allowed. His earned runs allowed. His ERA is actually 4 runs lower at home than it is on the road. The thing I think that is a big deal for him, at home in Tampa Bay, which is not a very good hitter's park, Archer gives up a lot of fly balls. Those fly balls in Tampa Bay turn into long outs towards the warning track. Those same fly balls when he's somewhere else or in another stadium turn into home runs. He's only given up like 4 or 5 home runs at home. He's given up more than double that, like 11 or 12 on the road. So I think that has a big, impact on his overall score. Like I said, he's a fly ball pitcher. At home, those fly balls get chewed up. On the road, some of those fly balls tend to get over the fence, and that's when he gives up, if he walks a guy here or there, then he gives up a 3-run home run. That's where he really gets himself into trouble. Are a couple bats on this Boston team that I want to look at. I mean, David Ortiz, 435 WOBA, 342 ISO against right-handed pitching. He's 11 of 29 lifetime against Archer with 2 home runs. So he's somebody that I think is definitely in a good spot today, and we should have some exposure to. I also like Xander Bogaerts hitting in front of him. Bogaerts 6 of 16 lifetime, even though it's a righty-on-righty matchup against Archer. I think part of the problem is, he sees a lot of fastballs hitting in front of David Ortiz, because teams, want to try to get as many outs as they can. Because if you can walk Ortiz with nobody on base and 2 outs, it's probably preferable to pitching to him, especially if you're Archer and, he's got a good history against you. So I do think Xander Bogaerts and David Ortiz are both in good spots. Bogaerts is expensive. You got to pay up for him. But on days where they're not facing a lefty and he's not an obvious choice, he tends to go very low owned. And he's actually been hitting right-handed pitching a lot better this year than he has in the past. So, using a guy like Xander Bogaerts, you're going to get him kind of low owned, and I do think that he has some upside today. On the other side of this game, you got Rick Porcello. He's having a solid year. He's not a guy that's likely to get up, especially against a very right-handed heavy lineup. You look at this Tampa Bay team, right-handed pitchers have been striking them out a lot. They really haven't been knocking righties around. You want to look at the lefties on this side. I think that Porcello's a guy that's kind of even to both righty and lefty, so you could even look at some of the right-handed bats if you wanted to. But, I mean, Corey Dickerson's probably in the best spot. He's been hitting in the 2-hole lately. Really the only guy with good numbers against right-handed pitching. You can look at guys like Logan Morrison, maybe a Brett Miller, but they don't really excite me all that much. Logan Forsythe, Evan Longoria, both much better against left-handed pitching. So I think this is a decent spot for Porcello. I'm not really looking to use a lot of Tampa Bay bats here. Next game we can talk about, we got the Cubs going up against the Cincinnati Reds. John Lester on the mound for the Cubs. And I mean, what can you really say about this guy this year? His ERA is 2.10. His whip is 1.10. He's got 99 strikeouts and 98 innings. I mean, I'm not really a huge fan, but it's tough to take bats against the guy. Like I said, I don't really consider these numbers to be real. I mean, guys don't get this much better at this stage of their career. But at the same point in time, the way he's been pitching right now, I can't really target bats against them. If you want to target some bats, there are some guys that do well against left-handed pitching on that Cincinnati team. Eugenio Suarez, 378 WOBA, 234 ISO for him. Zach Kozar, 365 WOBA, 263 ISO for him. Joey Votto in lefty-on-lefty situations, 388 WOBA, 179 ISO. So all these guys do profile pretty well. But again, do you want to pick on a good pitcher like Lester? I don't think I love Lester today. I don't think he's somebody I'm looking to get into a lot of my lineups, but I'm also not looking to take bats against him. On the other side of this game, I will be taking some bats against John Lamb, the left-hander from Cincinnati. I mean, it's basically bombs away every time this guy pitches. 52 innings pitched this year, 55 hits allowed, 8 home runs allowed, 24 base on balls. I mean, their teams are just lighting this guy up. So you look at a guy like Chris Bryant, fresh off his 16 total bases yesterday, 3 home runs and 2 doubles in his 5 at-bats, 364 WOBA, 252 ISO against left-handed pitching. So I really like him. Anthony Rizzo, even in lefty-on-lefty matchups, 371 WOBA, 199 ISO. I don't see Lamb going deep into this game either. So you're also going to get probably at least 2, maybe 3 at-bats out of the bullpen from Rizzo. And it's a very right-handed dominant bullpen. So he'll have his his platoon split probably by his 3rd, if not definitely by his 4th at bat. And there's a good chance he's going to get 4 or 5 at bats in this game anyway, because Chicago should be putting up some runs. Also really like Wilson Contreras if he's behind the plate again. Has been hitting in the 4 or the 5 hole for the Chicago Cubs team. The rookie catcher is a kid that can hit. even if they don't have him catching, they put him in the outfield. So this kid's been getting at bats, steadily every day, and he's been producing. So I like Contreras as well. I like Javier Baez. He does very well against left-handed pitching too. So, again, might only be 2 or 3 at bats against the lefty, but I can see him doing some damage. And then I also like Ben Zobrist, 385 WOBA against left-handed pitching. Zobrist has been a solid hitter for them all year. He's been a solid hitter for the last couple of years of his career. Another guy that you can look at. I have no problem stacking up the Chicago team today. I do think it's going to be pretty chalky, but I do think you need some exposure to them in cash games because they are probably the highest scoring team on the slate outside of the game in Coors Field. Next game we can look at, we got Cleveland going up against Atlanta. Corey Kluber's on the mound. Now, I kind of hate Kluber as an option on DraftKings today. He's very expensive. I think he's like 13.4 or 13.5. Atlanta does have a lot of left-handed bats to throw at him. They do have a low strikeout percentage, which is the same reason we were a little hesitant about Bauer yesterday. I do think Kluber pitches a good game. I'm not saying that he won't. I just don't know if he's going to return good value for us. I mean, at 13.4, we're going to need this guy to go complete game shutout with like 10 or 11 strikeouts. And like I said, Atlanta doesn't strike out a ton. They do have some left-handed bats that they might be able to, get to him here or there. The only guy in Atlanta I would really even consider is probably Freddie Freeman. 379 WOBA for him, 236 ISO. Outside of that, nobody really profiles incredibly well against right-handed pitching, especially a good right-handed pitcher, which don't get me wrong, Kluber is a very good pitcher. I didn't look at his price on FanDuel today, but at 13.4 on DraftKings, he's definitely not somebody that I'm using. On the other side of this game, we got Matt Whistler. Whistler's given up 3+ runs and over a hit per inning in 5 of his last 6 starts. I do think that some of these left-handed bats are going to be able to get to him on Cleveland today. I really like Jason Kipnis, 378 WOBA, 181 ISO. Again, he's another guy that has a pretty good, pretty good track record against right-handed pitching. I could see him having a pretty big game here. I also like Francisco Lindor, 353 WOBA for him, hitting in the 3-hole. Scoring some runs, knocking in some runs, pretty good spot as well for Kipnis. Carlos Santana, 344 WOBA, 226 ISO. Has a lot of pop, especially against the, right-handed pitching. I think he's somebody else that we could look at, especially if he's going to be hitting in like the 4 or 5 hole today. And then if you want to do a stack of Cleveland today, I like the wraparound stack where you start at number 9. The number 9 batter has been a guy named Tyler McQuinn. He's a young kid. 405 WOBA, 265 ISO against right-handed pitching. He's a big left-handed bat, has a little bit of pop, and he's somebody that goes incredibly low owned. So if you start the stack with him and then you come around to, if Santana's leading off or Rajai Davis and then Kipnis and then Lindor, and then either Napoli or Santana, I kind of like, mixing it up a little bit, especially if you're playing in a big tournament. You don't want to just go 1 through 5 like everybody else is doing. Next game we can talk about Miami against Detroit. Adam Conley, the lefty on the mound for Miami. Conley's actually been kind of decent this year, but he does struggle with right-handed bats, and Detroit has a lot of right-handed bats that they're going to throw at him. You look at that Detroit lineup against left-handed pitching. I mean, V-Mart, Castellanos, Kinsler, Miggy. These are all guys with like 370-plus WOBAs against, left-handed pitching. So I think this is going to be a very tough lineup for him to try to navigate through. The game is in an American League stadium, so they have the DH as well, so he doesn't even get the relief of having to go up against a pitcher this time. I just really don't see this being a good game for Connolly, and I do think that these right-handed Detroit bats get some runs against them. On the other side of this game, though, I think this could be a high-scoring game because we got Mike Pelfrey pitching for Detroit. He gives up a ton of hits. He gives up a ton of runs. Left-handed bats are hitting 350 against him. Right-handed bats are hitting 300. He doesn't give up a ton of home runs, though. But like I said, I mean, teams just basically, knock it around and run the carousel on him where, everybody's getting a couple hits, everybody's getting a couple walks, and it adds up to a bunch of runs in the end. Stanton is actually 9 of 19 lifetime against him with 2 home runs. So Stanton is starting to break out of that funk that he was in. I do think that this is a pretty good spot for him. He's obviously hit Pelfrey well in the past. A lot of that is from 2 or 3 years ago when Pelfrey was on the Mets, but Pelfrey hasn't gotten better over that course of time. So I still think Stanton's a pretty good play. And then I like all the lefties as well. If Derek Dietrich's leading off, 376 WOBA, 196 ISO for him. Christian Yelich, just a very solid hitter, 367 WOBA, 151 ISO. And then even Justin Bour, 366 WOBA, 262 ISO, has a little bit of upside power. Next game we can talk about, LA Dodgers at the Milwaukee Brewers. The rookie Urias is on the mound today. the kid is pretty solid. He's got high strikeout upside. The problem is he's only going about 90 pitches. They're not letting him go deep in the game, so he's basically getting you 4 or 5 innings. Right-handed bats are better against him, and this is a heavy right-handed bat lineup for the Milwaukee Brewers. Ryan Braun, 421 WOBA, 244 ISO, absolutely owns left-handed pitching. Jonathan Villar's got a 366 WOBA from on top of the order. He's another guy that I'd look at. And then you got a lot of other big bats like Chris Carter's a right-hander, Jonathan Lucroy's a right-hander. Aaron Hill has been absolutely killing left-handed pitching this year. So, I like this kid. He's good. He does have strikeout upside. He's a solid option. But remember, you're only going to get 4 or 5 innings out of him. You're probably going to get 6 or 7 Ks in those 4 or 5 innings. But I do think Milwaukee gets a run or two. And, with his price creeping up to like 7,500, I think, on the day, it might be a little bit too much of a negative between the hits and the runs, that he can't make up for it with the strikeouts if he's only going 4 or 5 innings. On the other side of this game, Chase Anderson had been pretty good this year. Left-handed bats are the ways to go after him, and the Dodgers team just lit him up recently. Gave up 7 runs in 2 1/3 innings in his last start to the Dodgers. So, Chase Anderson, definitely somebody that you want to take the left-handed bats against. Corey Seager, easily my favorite one. I mean, this kid's on fire. 399 WOBA, 237 ISO score. Hits right-handed pitching incredibly well. He's just such a solid hitter. I mean, it feels like every time he's up, he strokes one into the gap for either a double or a home run. He's been that hot. He's been that solid lately. So I definitely think Seager's somebody to look at. Jock Peterson, a little bit of upside there. Home run, 348 WOBA, 229 ISO. I guess he's in play. Justin Turner, even though righty on righty, Chase Anderson's, pretty good. It's the lefties that really give him trouble. Turner is basically like a left-handed bat because he hits right-handed pitching that well. 369 WOBA, 208 ISO score for Turner. So I think he's another guy you can look at, especially if he's still going to be in that 3-hole. Next game, we can look at Minnesota at the Chicago White Sox. Jose Quintana on the mound for the White Sox. Very tough on left-handed bats. Hasn't given up a home run to them all season. Only about a 200 average. Right-handed bats are the way to attack them. They're hitting about 269, although they do have a low fly ball, low home run rate. So he does keep the ball in the park. There are a lot of right-handed bats on Minnesota. The problem is none of them are really good. I mean, you got guys like Dozier, Plouffe, Park, Eduardo Nunez, who's probably been the best one hitting up on the top of the order. These are all like 340, 350 WOBA guys. Like nobody really stands out as a great play. I just think collectively as a whole, with it being all right-handed bats in this lineup, it's not going to be the easiest day ever for Quintana. So I do like Quintana, but I don't think he's going to have a big game here today against Minnesota, even though this Minnesota offense isn't lights out spectacular. On the other side of this game, Kyle Gibson is going to pitch for Minnesota. Left-handed bats have a higher average against him. He's another guy with a low ground ball rate that tends to keep it in the park. I mean, you're looking at this team. I think, Jose Abreu, righty on righty, 363 WOBA, 219 ISO, one of the best righty on righty bats that we have. Tim Anderson leading off the shortstop option, the young kid that they just called up. He's an interesting play. Adam Eaton behind him hitting in front of Abreu. And then Melky Cabrera right now, who's been hitting in the cleanup spot. He's been hot. He's been getting a lot of hits lately. So I think Melky is somebody that we can look at as well. Next game I want to talk about is St. Louis at KC. Michael Wacha, who's been pitching much better and going deeper into games. The last 3 games he's thrown over 100 pitches. Before that, he kept getting pulled like 85, 88, 89 pitches. So, again, he's another guy like we talked about with Danny Duffy yesterday. He's getting an extra inning than he used to now. So an extra inning, sometimes an extra strikeout or 2. It might not sound like a lot, but it gives you an extra, 4 or 5 points right there. Plus, it lets you pitch deeper in the game. So if you're able to hold that lead, now you're handing the ball over in the 6th where there's only, 9 outs left to get, as opposed to in the 5th where there's 12 outs left to get and a lot of things can happen. So it also gives them a better chance to get a win. I'm looking at this Kansas City team. Right-handed bats have hit Wacha better over the last 3 years. So that kind of points to guys like maybe Whit Merrifield or, Lorenzo Cain, the big right-handed bats they have on this team. Merrifield has been really good in righty on righty spots. So I think he's definitely somebody I want some exposure to. Cain is obviously much better against lefties. I think you still look at Eric Hosmer as well. 390 WOBA against right-handed pitching. So, he's somebody that's hit right-handers very well. I think all 3 of those guys are in a decent spot. But I actually like Wacha here a little bit. He's pretty cheap. He's like 7,400. He makes for a pretty solid SP2 on the day. On the other side of this game, you got Yordano Ventura. I don't really know what to think here. He got lit up in that Baltimore game, and then he threw at Machado, and, he picked up the suspension. And then the 2 games that he pitched before he actually went and served the suspension, he was lights out dominant, like 30 and 40 DraftKings points, 10 strikeouts, 8 innings the one game. I think he went like 7 innings with 8 strikeouts in the other game. If Ventura's going to be doing that stuff, it's going to be pretty solid. So, I think he's in a pretty decent spot. Matt Carpenter, probably the best bat to take against him. 407 WOBA, 269 ISO. I think you can look at the other left-handers like Brandon Moss and Matt Adams. I think they're both decent options here as well. Next game I want to talk about is Toronto at Colorado. You got J.A. Happ, the lefty. Right-handed bats have a higher average against them, and they hit all the home runs. So guys like Arenado and Story are the 2 main guys I want to look at. Arenado, 353 WOBA, 215 ISO. Story, huge, 374 WOBA, 235 ISO numbers. Obviously that's only from one season, a lot less at bat, a much smaller sample size, but both of these guys can hit left-handed pitching. A guy like DJ LeMahieu will probably be up higher in the order as well, 352 WOBA, 104 ISO score for him. Not really a lot of pop, but again, if he's going to be hitting up towards the top of the order. And then you got to look for, do they put in a guy like Descalzo or Christian Adams? If you can get one of these cheap guys in there, maybe a Tony Walters against a lefty. See, there's some of the cheap guys that can give you some Coors exposure. Because let's face it, this is going to be one of the higher scoring games on the day, at least projection wise. The other side of the game, we got Eddie Butler pitching for Colorado. Basically has about a 400 batting average allowed at home with an ERA of 9.70. So, yeah, I think they're going to score some runs against them. Left and right-handed bats have a batting average over 300. So you look at Edwin Encarnacion, double-donged again yesterday, 382 WOBA, 272 ISO. Josh Donaldson, 392 WOBA, 268 ISO. Devin Travis, who homered yesterday, 365 WOBA, 201 ISO, hits weak right-handed pitching pretty well. You got Michael Saunders, the lefty, batting cleanup. I think all those guys are in play. Toronto and Colorado, both going to be pretty solid, highly owned stacks. But, I can see it. You got 2 pitchers on the mound that are a little bit of a gas can. I like the Colorado righties. I like everybody on Toronto. Like I said, you're going to need some exposure to Coors Field today because it's probably going to be a pretty high-scoring game. Next game we can look at, we got the Phillies at Arizona. Zach Greinke's on the mound. He's got 30 DK points in 4 of his last 7 games. I know it's been a little bit rough for him at home, but he is going up against a bad lineup here in Philly. Philly is not a team that really punishes a pitcher. You're looking at him, you want to take left-handed bats against Greinke. The only one that stands out is Odubel Herrera for me. 354 WOBA, 141 ISO. And again, he's not a guy that has a lot of home run pop. So I don't think Greinke's going to get lit up here. I think this is a really good spot for Greinke. He's going up against an offense that just really doesn't have a lot of upside. I don't think this offense is even capable of putting up a big number against them. And, people are going to shy away from him because he has struggled a little bit at home, which again, it's a big switch for him. This is a very good hitter's park. That's now his home park. But again, this offense that he's going up against, I think he'll be able to handle them pretty well. So I do like Greinke. I think he's one of my top pitching options on the day. On the other side, we got Jared Eichhoff. Not a huge strikeout guy, but he has been solid in his last 4, 6 or 7 innings, 5 strikeouts or so. Left-handed bats have a higher average against them, higher fly ball. His fly ball rate and his home run rate are average. I'm not going to say that it's elevated, but it's also not really good. So, guys are about league average against them as far as power numbers. Jeff Lamb in a pretty good spot. Jake Lamb in a pretty good spot. 356 WOBA, 196 ISO for him. You got Chris Herman, the left-handed hitting catcher on the, platoon. So I think he's a guy that we can look at. And then obviously Paul Goldschmidt, always, even in righty-on-righty situations, 400 WOBA, 239 ISO. You really can't argue with, the upside of using Goldie. Next game I want to talk about is Houston against the Los Angeles Angels. Now, I know Houston is prone to some strikeouts, but I'm not really buying it here with Lincecum. People are going to try to make that argument, but Lincecum's not a strikeout pitcher since he's come back. This is his 3rd start since coming back. I think he had 2 strikeouts in each one of his last 2 outings. I'm not looking for him to be sitting down a lot of Houston bats. I think this is one of those games where, we always say either the Houston bats connect and put up a big number, or, they strike out 8 to 10 times and the pitcher against them puts up a big number. I think this is one where they're going to connect a little bit and they're going to knock Lincecum around a tad. I like Carlos Correa, 368 WOBA, 221, probably their best righty against righties. Altuve is always somebody that's in play for me, 350 WOBA, 164, especially now that they got him in the 3-hole where, he can get some RBIs. He can also still steal a base if he gets on with nobody in front of him. He's shown the pop this year to be able to hit more home runs as a 5'5", 150-pound guy than anybody I ever thought would be able to. So really like Altuve, really like Correa. You can look at Colby Rasmus. He's basically a home run kind of guy. I think he's more of a GPP play. 212 ISO score against right-handed pitching. If he's going to be hitting fourth or fifth, he should have a chance to drive in, guys like Altuve and Correa in front of him. If you're stacking them up, I guess you can use a guy like Springer, maybe some of the lower left-handed bats in the bottom of that order. Guys like Valbuena or Jason Castro, depending on who's in the game. If, you get Evan Gattis in there, maybe you want to throw him in there as well. Like I said, I'm not convinced that Lincecum is going to be a stud in this league at this point anymore. And the strikeout numbers are something that, I don't think he's still able to put people away. So I don't expect him to have a big game against Houston here. And I do think Houston's going to knock him around. On the other side of this game, we got Scott Feldman, and Feldman's basically been pitching in relief. He's kind of getting a spot start here today. I think this turns into a bullpen game. We're going to see 4 or 5 different arms just, try to cobble together a start here for the, for the Houston Astros, maybe 3 or 4 innings for each of these guys and, maybe 2 or 3 pitchers that they're going to try to use. Mike Trout, the only guy I really like, 412 WOBA, 282 ISO. He's the only consistent bat on this Angels team for me. So outside of Trout, I'm not really looking to use anybody. Next game, we got Baltimore at San Diego. I actually love bats in this game. Eric Johnson for San Diego's on the mound. 26 innings pitched, 39 hits allowed, 11 walks, 25 runs, and 12 home runs that he's given up. So he's basically given up a home run about every 2 innings, giving up about 1.5 hits an inning, half a walk an inning, and about a run an inning. So, yes, I think Baltimore is going to light him up here today. Chris Davis, probably my favorite play, 395 WOBA, 320 ISO, left-handed power bat in San Diego, where actually left-handed power bats do pretty well going up against Eric Johnson. You got Machado, you got Trumbo, you got Waiters, you got Scoop, you got Adam Jones. All these guys are in play for me today. It's not a question of do you want to stack up the Orioles. To me, it's a question of which 5 Orioles or 4 Orioles if you're on FanDuel. You really want to stack up. I think Chris Davis has to be in every one of those stacks. And then, like I said, I like the guys with the home run power because, Johnson's given up a home run every 2 innings. He's given up like 3, 3, 2, 2, and 3 in his 5 starts. So this is a guy that's giving up multiple home runs, not just a game, every game. He's giving up multiple home runs. So I like Davis, Machado, Trumbo, the other guys with huge home run power. If I'm stacking them up, those are the guys that I definitely want to make sure I have some exposure to. On the other side of this game, we got Ubaldo Jimenez. Left-handed bats normally better against him. He's had a rough season, but he did have a gem against San Diego his last game out. San Diego does struggle with guys that, are right-handed pitchers and can strike some guys out. Their lineup is very, basically set up to hit left-handed pitching. The only 2 guys against right-handed pitching I even like a little bit. You got Travis Jankowski leading off for them. He's been hot. He's been getting on base, and every time he gets on base, he steals. He's turning into what Cesar Hernandez was last year. The guy's still pretty cheap. He hits a single, he winds up on second. He walks, he winds up on second. And then if anybody behind him gets a hit, he winds up scoring a run and giving you, 8 to 10 points per at-bat, which is pretty solid and definitely something we can use. I think he's in a decent spot here against Ubaldo because, righty-lefty matchup they got going on. The only other guy I'd really look at is probably Will Myers, 340 WOBA, 214 ISO in righty-on-righty situations. He has been the biggest bat on San Diego this year, even bigger than Matt Kemp. Kemp really only hits left-handed pitching at this point. Right-handed pitching, he's, meh against. So I like Myers. I like Jankowski. I do think it could actually be a sneaky good spot here for Ubaldo Jimenez, too. I'm going to be interested to see what Josh's take is on that when I see, Josh's on the bump article today. Next game I want to talk about Pittsburgh at Seattle. Hisashi Iwakuma on the mound for Seattle. He doesn't really get blown up, but he's also not really a great pitcher. He's allowed 10 home runs in his last 5 games, but only about 4 runs per game. So, again, he's a guy that's not giving up a lot of base runners. He is getting tagged for home runs, but when he gets tagged for home runs, they tend to be solo shots. So if I'm looking at anybody on this Pittsburgh team, I want the guys that have the home run upside. Jung Ho Kang is probably my favorite. 367 ISO, 205 WOBA. I'm sure somebody's going to dig into the numbers and find that these guys faced each other over in, Asia at some point in their careers. But, Kang is a guy that has power against right-handed pitching. Iwakuma is a guy that's, pretty even to both right and left-handed bats and does give up the home run ball. So I think this is a good spot to use guys like maybe a Kang as a one-off. I also think you can look at guys like Sterling Marte, maybe Andrew McCutchen, Gregory Polanco, the lefty. I think these are guys that I want in my lineup. I don't want to stack them, but I do like them as one-offs because one or two of these guys I think can tag Iwakuma for a home run today, and it wouldn't be bad to have some exposure to the guys who do. On the other side of this game, we got Jonathan Neese, right-handed bats, higher average, more home runs against him. Nelson Cruz, great spot anytime he faces a weak lefty. 451 WOBA, 337 ISO. Franklin Gutierrez, who's kind of like Cruz light, 409 WOBA, 287 ISO for him. Chris Iannetta, 358 WOBA, 172 ISO for him. And then you also, you can also look at guys like Robinson Cano if you want to. I do think it's a pretty decent spot. I do think that they're going to get some runs here against Nice, so I like this Seattle offense. Last game we'll talk about, Oakland at San Francisco. Kendall Graveman on the mound for Oakland, and he's been bad to everybody. Righties hitting 308 against them, lefties hitting 280 against them. He's given up 12 home runs in 75 innings. I think you can look at anybody on the San Francisco team. A guy like Joe Panic, 354, 165. Guy like Brandon Belt, 375, 203. Really like Belt in here. Posey, even righty on righty, 353, 151. I definitely think San Francisco can score some runs. My problem with San Francisco is they tend to spread it out throughout the whole lineup. Everybody's got one or two hits. Everybody has an RBI or a run scored. It's not really like one or two guys do all the damage. So I can't really tell you who to pinpoint. They're more of a team I'd rather just stack up against Graveman because he is that bad. Again, it's a late game. The lineup comes out late. Sometimes people forget about it. So, I wouldn't mind using the San Francisco team. On the other side, you got Albert Suarez, relief pitcher who's been stretched out into a starter because they've needed one. Basically just emergency starting pitching duty for him, and he's kind of stuck in a rotation for a little bit now. Doesn't really go deep into the games. He's an okay pitcher. Stephen Vogt, the only left-handed bat they really have to attack him, 340 WOBA for Vogt. You can use guys like Coco Crisp or Billy Burns if you want. I'm not going to. You also have the bigger right-handed bats in the middle of the order. Danny Valencia has been hitting right-handed pitching well, 364, 228 for him. Chris Davis has the power upside with the 253 ISO score. WOBA is 348, so it's respectable as well, although not very good. But honestly, I don't really want any of the bats in this game. I'm kind of shying away from it. So that sums it up. I'm almost out of breath here. Large 15-game slate. Tried to keep the video as short as possible for you guys while giving you all the information. So, hopefully we were able to do that. Pretty good day yesterday if you rode, Danny Duffy and some of the bats that we talked about earlier on here today. Obviously, if you had Chris Bryant, that was the difference between you cashing highly and, fighting to min cash most of your tournaments. But you were still able to get up in your cash games without him. I mean, I actually got up into GPPs without him because I was very heavy on Tampa Bay, as I told you guys I liked yesterday. So there are other ways to get it done, although if you wanted big money yesterday, you really needed Bryant and, and Duffy in your lineup. So that wraps it up for us here today at, rotocurve.com. Thank you guys for joining us. And as always, stay classy, DFS.